our program today. For those of you who aren't already familiar with his work, ESPN senior writer Wright Thompson is widely considered one of America's best sports writers. Engaging from your best-selling new book that just came out this week, you're arguably one of the most popular as well. So congratulations on that. The book is The Cost of These Dreams, Sports Stories, and Other Serious Business. He's going to be talking about some of that today. But the best sports writer moniker, I think, actually sells him short, because he's also one of the country's best reporters. In an era of hot takes and endless social streams, Wright keeps proving over and over again the power of the long-form story. And just an aside, I assigned one of your stories to my class, and my student said, "This is the longest story I've ever read."
Yes.
And she said, "But it's my favorite." So
you made that last part up.
No, I promise I didn't. My other students can vouch for that. But whether it's a story about navigating the slums of Rio during the World Cup or grappling with the twin histories of race riots and football champions in 1962 Oxford, his stories make clear first why you should care, and then they make you understand. Each is the result of exhaustive research, obsessive reporting, and thoughtful writing. So the late Willie Morris, whose legacy Wright is honoring with this lecture series, is also one of Mississippi's literary lions. He wrote bestsellers, was the youngest editor ever at Harper's Magazine in New York, and he taught at this school for a time in the early 1980s. And as Dean Will Norton has written, his teaching brought a measure of excellence to our program that was uncommon on a typical campus. Dean Norton has said that Morris's approach to teaching was simple. It was to have students read great work and then show them what makes it great. And I think it's safe to assume that if Willie Morris were still around today, he would be assigning a lot of Wright Thompson. So thank you in advance to Wright for launching this series.
Yep.
And for sharing some of your stories today. And just a note that we'll leave time for Q&A, but also you're invited to join for a reception outside afterward. There will be books for sale, and they take express.
And yeah, you can charge it to mom and dad. I've been joking, like, all I want is to have a meal plan again. Like, if I could just go get Subway at 3 a.m. and just swipe it and it goes to Clarksdale, Mississippi, that would be really fabulous. Thanks, everybody, so much for coming. I want to talk a little bit about the book, a little bit about Willie, who was a real mentor and hero of mine, and then take some questions. I appreciate everybody showing up. So it is interesting she talked about reporting and in an era of hot takes. And I've been sort of going around the last couple of days talking about this book. And the one thing that I find myself talking over and over and over again is that the stories in here, if they have some common thread, it is the idea that you have to cut through myth and cut through brand. I mean, one of the most popular words right now that we hear is brand. Brand is just a fancy name for lie. And we all do it. I mean, the number of conversations I have, you're on the phone with people and they're like, "Well, what is your personal brand?" And I'm like, I don't know. Chick-fil-A? I'm not really sure. So the first story in this book is, by the way, I'm dating myself, but I'm giving this away. My friend Chico's in the front row. Chico gave me my first ever journalism job. It was for a magazine in Oxford. This mic seems like it's going hot and cold. Is it weird to anybody else? Is you good? Okay. So Chico in the front row had a music magazine in Oxford called Cochlear Thrills. He couldn't pay me, but what he could give me was a laminate for the Summer Widespread Panic tour. And his friend Jojo, who's the keyboard player in the band, would get his mail in Oxford. So the deal was, if I would take Jojo his mail, I could just have a big pocket full of backstage passes to hand out and do my whole thing. So ESPN pays me a little bit more than nothing, but I'm not entirely sure that I wouldn't do that again. So I signed this one for Chico to give to Jojo, because we're all still 19 in our heads. But the first story in this book is about Michael Jordan, and I want to talk a little bit about that story to give you an idea of what hopefully all the stories in the book are like, and I feel like that's probably the best way to do this. I went to Charlotte to see Michael Jordan the day after he moved out of his house in Chicago for the last time. And so he was going to Charlotte for a couple of weeks and then moving into his place in Florida. So I was really catching a guy in flux. and it was a really interesting time, and he was about to turn 50. I'm going to read you one paragraph because the most annoying thing at a reading is someone reading. It's always just much better if they talk. So when you're out there, whoever in the room ends up writing their book and you go on tour, don't read a lot because it's really super annoying. So I'm going to read from the beginning of this just to give you a sense. Jordan feels in transition. He moved out of his house in Chicago and is moving into a new one in Florida in 3 weeks. He's engaged. Inside, he's dealing, finally, with the cost of his own competitive urges, asking himself difficult questions. To what must he say goodbye? What is there to look forward to? Catching an introspective Jordan is like finding a spotted owl, but here he is, considering himself. Jordan relights his cigar. It keeps going out. Listen, his friend Quinn Buckner says, Father Time ain't lost yet. The idea hangs in the air. Damn, Buckner continues, 50. He shakes his head. Can you believe it? Jordan says quietly, and it sounds like he's talking to himself. And so when you go out and do stories like this, yes, he's one of the most famous people in the world, but he is struggling with something that everyone in this room will eventually struggle with, which is aging, which is the loss of power and the loss of time, and being forced to look at yourself at a certain age and realize that you are the sum of all of these decisions and choices you've made, and you might like some of them and not like other ones, but you can't go back and change them. I mean, like Michael Jordan is very well aware of the fact that Mike Jordan from Wilmington, North Carolina is dead and that Michael Jordan killed him, like the avatar of him. I mean, there's this great John Updike, he's a writer, and the quote is, "The mask eats the face." And so, people who have to live in public, whether you're, on the Ole Miss football or basketball team, or you're Michael Jordan, or you're a musician, or anyone really who lives in a social media age, which is all of us, there's a real danger. One, you have to have a mask. And two, you have to be really careful that somewhere along the way, the mask doesn't eat your face and that you lose some essential part of yourself. And that's very much what Michael Jordan is still struggling with. I mean, what do you do when you used to be Michael Jordan? And, he talks very eloquently in here about, like, he knows every decision he made from 20 until 42 was designed to make him a great basketball player. And it cost him, in a lot of ways, his marriage, in a lot of ways, the relationship with his family that he might like to have. Anyone in his life who wasn't sharpening him got cut out of his life. He erased any empathy he had and replaced it with this cutthroat mercenary desire to just kill whoever the person in front of him was. And he did this over and over and over. And now he has all of these traits. And he talks about, all I want to do is give them back, but I can't. And so all these traits are not only useless to him in his life, they're worse than useless because they're the things that are actively conspiring to keeping him from enjoying having been Michael Jordan. And he mourns for that past that's lost. His father was murdered in the middle of Jordan's NBA career, and a lot of people don't know this, but it was a robbery, and what they stole was 2 of the Bulls championship rings that Jordan had given his father. And he felt deeply responsible in this weird way. And James Jordan, he took no shit off Michael, and so James was the last person for whom Mike Jordan still existed. And he tethered Michael to something in a very real way. Like when Michael wanted to put a hot tub in his basement in Chicago, he was going to pay somebody a bunch of money. And his dad was like, don't do that. That's ridiculous. So James got some of his buddies and they drove up to Chicago and they did the work in Michael's house. And he was the one who he was the only person who kept some small piece of Mike Jordan from Wilmington, North Carolina alive. And when he was gone, Jordan just became completely untethered. And he famously quit football and he went to play baseball. And there are all sorts of conspiracy theories about why he did that. None of those are true. It has nothing to do with gambling. It's that his father's favorite sport was baseball. and his father's favorite sport to watch him play was baseball. So in the middle of this, he is the most famous basketball player in the world. He's the most famous athlete in America. He quits his sport to go struggle in public, and it was, as often happens, a very private thing happening on full display. And so, Michael still loves to watch Westerns because he and his father would watch Westerns. His dad's favorite movie was The Unforgiven, and they would watch this over and over. Michael has this huge Gulfstream, this big-ass jet, that is painted to look like a sneaker. He got the people from Jordan Brand to do the paint job. It's unbelievable. You can't miss it. I mean, it comes in, like a big Carolina blue eagle. And his staff, like when he goes to China a lot, and his staff, he has people on his staff who would rather fly commercial than fly on Jordan's Gulfstream because he watches Western movies the entire time and watches them really loudly. And they were just like, I'd rather just fly United and eat the peanuts than listen to, I have to watch Two Mules for Sister Sarah 4 times. And so, he's very in touch with these ghosts, and yet he knows that he has turned into a person who is different. He said he went to his fiance, who's now his wife. She's Cuban American. Her grandparents don't really speak English. They don't really know who he is, certainly not sort of how he exists in the culture. And he went and he said, he went and spent like Thanksgiving or Easter or something with them and said, this is the first day in maybe 20 years where every single detail of the day wasn't organized around my whim. My plane leaves when I say it leaves. Cars are waiting for me when I step out of a plane. I don't ever have to wait. I do everything I want to do almost 24 hours of the day. And I went into their house and I just was a guy having dinner. And he goes, and I know I'm supposed to say that it was really refreshing, but I fucking hated it, was his exact quote. And he's like, I'm just so entitled now. And he knows it, and it's interesting. I want to read one more thing. This is the end of this story, and then talk about Willie. So this is the last bit of the title of the story is Michael Jordan Has Not Left the Building. By the way, as an aside, I spent one night where I watched 3 straight basketball games with him. And one, he was sitting up there calling out what LeBron James was going to do before he did it. Like, if he would go right, he would just be like, pull-up jumper, left to the hole. And he did it over and over, and then he started doing it with other players, and you realize, oh, Michael Jordan is scouting basketball games that he's never going to play in. And his playing weight was 218. And that's a very scary number in Jordan land because, he just got back from this vacation. He's eating and drinking. He got up to 250-something. He's like, I got to get in the gym. And so he gets down to 240. He gets down to 237. He gets down to 229. And then because he's a crazy person, he starts thinking, oh, I could get to 218. And everybody around him is like, oh, no. You can't do that. So this is the end of that story. Jordan is alone. He hates being alone because that means it's quiet and he doesn't like silence. He can't sleep without noise. Sleep has always been a struggle for him. All the late night card games, the trips to the casino during the playoffs, they've been misunderstood. They weren't the disease, they were the cure. He didn't even start drinking until he was 27 and complained of insomnia to a doctor. Have a few beers after the game, he was advised. That would knock off the edge. The house is dark. It's almost 1 a.m. and he opens the iPad app that controls the loft's audio-visual system. Every night he does the same thing, and he does it now. He turns the bedroom television to the Western Channel. The cowboy movies will break the darkness, break the silence, allow him to rest. It's just like the old days, him and Pops. Jordan climbs into bed. The film on the screen is Unforgiven. He knows every scene, and sometime before the shootout in the saloon, he falls asleep. And, that is a story designed to cut through the myth of someone. I mean, we all have stories we tell about ourselves, and we all have stories other people tell about us. And very often those things feel very different. And, when someone says they're misunderstood, that's what that means, is that they know something about their own motivations that other people don't know. One of the craziest things about clickbait journalism now is they often assume motivation, which is crazy. Like, oh, this person must think this or want that. And I think if you're going to write profiles of people, it's really interesting to live in the space between the story they tell about themselves and the story other people tell about them, to figure out what the disconnect is and to try to tell something that is true. And, that's what, Willie Morris, who a lot of people know and some people might not know, was a magazine editor and writer from Yazoo City, Mississippi. And, he was the youngest editor of Harper's Magazine, but really he was the editor at Harper's Magazine who first started assigning stories like the ones that I write. I mean, he invented this world. So, like, everything you ever read in a magazine is in that magazine because Willie Morris decided he wanted his Harper's to be different. And so, like, that's the thing that people don't talk about a lot. Is like, well, would Newt Rodney be able to outcoach Urban Meyer? I don't know the answer to that, but he did it first. And it's a very interesting thing that he created this world. And Willie, if you read Willie, was just a fierce enemy of the saccharine, of cliche, of hypocrisy, was a real champion of empathy and compassion. And that's really what drew me to him. I remember his most famous book, which, especially if you're from Mississippi, and especially if you both love Mississippi and think that it is a deeply screwed up place that refuses to look at itself clearly, you need to read this book, because it was the first time I'd ever read someone talk about this place with that duality, with the ability to hold two thoughts in their head at the same time, which is, I love Mississippi and I sort of hate Mississippi. And the book is, I read it for the first time in 10th grade. I closed it and decided that I wanted to be a magazine writer. And nearly everything I've done, every decision I've made since then was about that. And I guess that's where I want to close. There are a lot of people in the room who are studying journalism. There are people who want to be journalists. It's probably a smaller group. And not to exclude everybody, but I do want to talk to you. This, as we all know, is just an unbelievably tribal time. The reason people say they hate the media is because the media tells people things that they disagree with, and which is sort of like, nobody likes to be told they're wrong. And there's never been a more important time to not let either side's tribe infect your journalism. Like, I had this movie that came out, a 30 for 30 I helped do, called Ghost of Ole Miss, and it was interesting because on the day it ran, I was so happy because the far right-wing Breitbart thing, they really went after me. And the crazy far left Austin, Texas Chronicle, whatever, they really came after me. And I was just like, this is perfect. Like, both of these whack jobs are mad at me. And so, like, I've done it. Like, and as you're going out into the world, you want to carry with you that spirit. The spirit of Willie Morris. It's the spirit of anyone who you look up to and admire. This idea that if we are going to have an American tribe ever again, it is going to have to start with people standing on this small island of truth and then making it bigger and bigger. And I'm talking about everybody. Like, everybody's got blood on their hands in this because people think their truth is the truth. And journalists are sort of the people standing in the breach. And so as you're leaving this place, there has never been a more important time for this to be done. There's never been a more important time for you to not fuck this up. There has never been a more important time for you to be true and to not be pulled from either side. I always thought it was really fascinating. Like, even though there are many things to like and many things to hate about Mississippi. By the way, as a total aside, is there ever been a bigger participation trophy than a Confederate statue? But that's a side thing. If you lose, you don't get to have the damn statue. But there's never been a more important time for us to go out into the world and to tell the truth. And if there's going to be an American tribe, that's where it's going to be formed. I loved that Willie Morris liked to write really sweetly about home and about dogs. And about his family, and he liked to throw sticks of dynamite at hypocrisy and at bullheadedness. And when he died, he laid in state in the state capitol, the old state capitol. And a lot of the people who put him there were people who he'd excoriated and people who disagreed mightily with things he thought, as you might with my joke about the Confederate statue. And the thing that I think we have to figure out a way to find is for the tribe of Willie Morris, which is the tribe of Mississippians who agree and disagree with each other, to figure out how to find some common place of ground where you can, talk about your political issues and your differences, but also understand that you really like dogs and home. I really appreciate it. Let's fire away with some questions. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think two things. I mean, I think one, yes, I agree with you, but two, it will inevitably end up in the public opinion being LeBron because the new shiny thing always wins over the old dusty thing, and that's what Jordan's afraid of. He's going to have two deaths. One when he actually dies, and two as his legacy fights to exist. And he is aware of how he exists in the zeitgeist and is worried. We sat there one time and we watched some crazy SportsCenter debate about Brady and Montana. And it started, and Michael was like, watch this. They're going to say Brady's better than Montana, and that's crazy. And he just knows this is going to happen to him because, I love when Roman generals used to return to Rome victorious. They would have these huge parades through the streets, and there would be someone who sat behind them whispering in their ear in Latin, which I can't say this in Latin, so sorry, but they would say over and over, all glory is fleeting, all glory is fleeting, all glory is fleeting. And that's absolutely true. So it will absolutely end up, people who never saw Michael play will talk about LeBron, and they will say it with such fervor and certitude that it'll make your head explode. And the only comfort you can have is that in 30 years, there's going to be some other player, and then the people are going to be talking about how that guy's so much better than LeBron, and you're going to be like, I saw LeBron play, and I saw this play. You're on crack. So that it's always, a memory is always effaced. Yes. Yes. He asked his people, how did he find all that stuff out? And they said, Michael, you told him. And he went, You got something? Yeah. I think that's absolutely true. And I mean, can you not really compare Jordan and LeBron because they don't really do the same thing? I mean, it'd be an interesting conversation. There's a better comparison with LeBron and say Magic Johnson or somebody who controls a game like that. They're two totally different players. It's also how would you compare Wilt Chamberlain and Michael Jordan? I mean, it's apples and oranges. So from an actual if you really follow the sport, that's absolutely true. I think it's just something that people like to do because they like to yell at each other. Yeah, but no, they're totally, and the games are totally different. I mean, not to go in the weeds about the NBA, but if LeBron James had to play against the 89 to 92 Detroit Pistons, he'd be in the hospital. I mean, it's just a different game. Is that? Yeah. You look for, you want to make Michael Jordan as small and human as possible. And if you're writing about, I mean, I'll call him a civilian, but if you're writing about somebody who's just a normal person, you want to find the extraordinary in them. I mean, the things all those things Michael Jordan is struggling with seem very specific to him, but really he's just scared of dying. And so everybody's scared of dying. And so that's the thing. Like, what is the universal thing there? Yes, sir. North Toward Home. I love that book so much. I have on my desk, I have a signed copy he sent me right after I read it. He and my dad were friends, and I came down in the morning. I stayed up all night and read the book and was like waving it like, oh my, where has this been? And a couple of weeks later, a package shows up from Jackson, Mississippi, and it's Willie has sent me a copy of the book. He was also really generous. Like, I mean, I'm putting words and thoughts into his mouth, but it seems to me like he was aware of what it meant for people to be close to him. And so he gave that to people as his real gift. You just got to sort of touch it, and maybe you could carry a little bit of it with you away. Yes. Yeah. I mean, on some level, you get sent to. I went to write about Conor McGregor before he fought Floyd Mayweather, and went to Dublin to his neighborhood. I mean, you want to see someone clearly and try to find the thing that's been hiding in plain sight, which is that. I mean, up close, it seemed very clear even before the fight that Conor McGregor was absolutely going to self-destruct, and that the people around him were worried about what would happen when he lost the focus of the next opponent. Because from 16 until this fight, he had fought someone every couple of months, and when he's focused, he makes good choices. And when he's not, he does not. And I think they were worried about, what the lucky blessing of all this money was going to do if he didn't have sort of someone right in his face. And so I wanted that to come across in the story, because that was something that wasn't clear in all the stuff I'd read about him. But when I got there, it was just so overwhelmingly palpable with everyone in his life that I was like, the story has to be about this. Yes.
Why do you think the LeBron versus MJ debate is such a contentious issue day in and day out? MLB and NFL,
What-
there's debates.
It's like Elvis. It's like cut your hair. It's like, the Beatles or the Devil's music. It's like you shouldn't listen to rap, and Jay-Z is, poisoning America's youth. It's that people always fight with their parents. It's why people my age complain about millennials. It's why do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't really, it's just everybody thinks that whatever it was better, and whatever it's becoming is crap. And that has happened, I bet 2,000 years ago in Rome. They were like, what is this colored toga? Do you know what I mean? Like, their parents were furious that somebody would wear a red toga. It's always something. And so I think that the LeBron MJ is a generational. It's code for people to say people your age are stupid.
Why do you think that one may be more important to people than say someone in the NFL and the debate in let's say the NFL or the MLB? It seems like
I think Jordan and LeBron are more famous than anyone who has played in the NFL in their lifetime. I just don't think there's a comparison. If you drop Jordan or LeBron off anywhere in America, people would know. If you dropped him anywhere in the world, people would know. If you drop Peyton Manning off in Paris, they'd be like, that dude has a huge forehead. Yes, sir. Absolutely. And then George Mikan before. I mean, there's always, it's Bill Russell or Wilt was an argument. And that was that was code too. That was Foreman and Ali. It wasn't just Russell and Wilt. It was what kind of person, and what they symbolized. And so I feel like all debates are really just safe ways of having difficult conversations. Oh yeah, you're next.
Alright, so in the whole Michael Jordan and LeBron situation.
Yeah.
So I say about in a couple years they just gonna watch Michael Jordan away and send LeBron to the bench, right? So do you feel like, because now everybody trying to compare Zion Wilson to LeBron James, and he's still in college. So do you feel like that's gonna be the debate?
Well, what's interesting, I mean, you remember, when Jordan retired, Grant Hill was going to be the next Jordan, and then Tracy McGrady was going to be the next Jordan. I just saw Tracy McGrady with a gray goatee on television. He did not become the next Jordan. I mean, he's a fabulous player, but I think people will compare players to LeBron for the rest of our lives until one of them has the career that really rivals it. I think probably. And it's interesting too because, I mean, you could see how LeBron evolves from this weird hybrid combination of Michael and Magic. Like Steph Curry is almost like the first postmodern player because he doesn't really he's not trying to be anyone. I mean, the thing he does, no one has ever really done before. So that's interesting too. Like, is he not in the conversation because he can't? There is no simple, easy comparison or way to see it. Yeah. Yes.
So you've been really fortunate to get to spend time with Michael Jordan and did big interview with Tiger Woods. What's the story that you want that you haven't gotten?
I don't know, man. I just want a vacation. I don't know, man. No, that is my vacation. I do a food show on the SEC network called True South with John T. Edge, which is just the biggest boondoggle. It's just the greatest job ever. It's ridiculous. Literally what we do is we go to a city and then we eat lots of food and then we charge it to the Walt Disney Corporation. And then we go do it again. Yes. Oh, sorry. I read Gary Smith. I read Frank DeFord, W.C. Hines. Living. I mean, I read Tom Junot, who writes for us, who's fabulous. It's weird. I mean, I'm not on any social media, so stuff has to get sent to me. So there's all sorts of stuff that happens that I don't see. And I just sort of figure if anything rises to the level of it's really important, somebody's going to text it or email it to me. Well, that's interesting. I need to do a better job of that. I hardly ever read anything that isn't for a story because it's just like I mean to. I have a bedside table full of stuff that I promise you I'm going to read. We just threw away like 80 New Yorkers because they were taunting us. They were just standing there like, you don't read me. You don't read me. And I can't even look at them anymore. Can we just shred these things so I don't feel guilty? In the back, way back. I think the bigger role is that I think it's less Michael and more the people who were marketing and packaging and managing Tiger because, they sort of screwed up, but you can sort of understand. This is actually be a really interesting thing for a marketing class to study because he comes along and he is clearly going to be the most famous athlete in the world. His people are looking around trying to figure out what do we do? And at that time, the most famous athlete in the world was Michael Jordan. And so they packaged and sold Tiger exactly like Jordan was packaged and sold. And it's interesting because nobody stopped to consider like the central problem at the heart of all of this, which is that Michael Jordan is an extreme extrovert and Tiger Woods is an extreme introvert. And so they put a Jordan mask on Tiger, and I think it broke him, honestly. I mean, that's a gross oversimplification. There's a lot of water that went under that bridge, and I think slowly over time, Tiger sort of became more and more himself. But if you look at those early commercials, a guy grinning and bouncing, that's not Tiger. And that becomes very interesting. I mean, I think that in some ways, like we talked about earlier, the mask did eat his face. Jordan, you would like Jordan. You know what I mean? Like, Jordan can hang and is fun, and you can give him crap, and he'll give you crap. I mean, he's very alpha, but he's not a diva, if that makes sense. Like, he would not, I mean, he's in it. You can sit and argue, like, you can argue sports. At one point, he was like, name me the 5 best NBA players ever. Now, you want to talk about intimidating. When Michael Jordan's like, name me the 5 best players ever. And then he's like, name me the 5 best active players. Then we argued about Tim Duncan because he loves Tim Duncan. and yeah, it was like he can hang. You would like him. I would absolutely consider Kobe Bryant one of the best. And like my favorite Kobe question to ask is, if I put a gun to your head and there was going to be a game of 1-on-1 between Kobe Bryant and LeBron James, there's not a human being in this room who chooses LeBron James because Kobe would rather die than lose. Yes. Yes. Well, I'm on camera, so I'm definitely not going to agree with you. The, yeah, yeah. Well, that becomes interesting because it might be Dion. Well, Dion was definitely a better baseball player, and he wasn't as good a football player as Michael was a basketball player, but he's in he's in a sort of group there. I mean, because you couldn't throw to the left side of the field for 8 years. That is an interesting debate. Uh, I mean, I really want to answer you, so I'm trying to think. I would say that, I mean, these are cliches, but they're all true. That it's a marathon and it's not a sprint. And any of the stuff you're doing now, no matter how great you think it is, it sucks. And you're going to be embarrassed of it in 5 years. But what you're really doing is it's the 10,000 hour things, or it's, anybody who plays sports, it's practice, it's reps. You're getting reps because what you want to do, I was 36 when when I went and did that Michael Jordan story, and in some ways, all the stories before had been to make sure that when I got put in that room, I didn't screw it up. And so, what you want to do is get to 35 and be really good at your craft, and have made a lot of mistakes, and have written a lot of stories, or produced a lot of packages, or done a lot of podcasts, done a lot of television, made a lot of mistakes, made them over and over, learned from them, and some of the stuff it's just work ethic. If you're at a paper or a television station or a radio station, or you work for a marketing firm, if you're not the hardest working person in that room of people, you are not going to be the one who makes it. And I've just seen it over and over and over again. I am by no means the most talented person I've ever worked with at ESPN. The reason I ended up doing all this stuff is I'm willing to stay on it longer than other people, I think, and that I'm not going to quit. And yeah, next to you, sorry.
Do you ever think it's a good idea for athletes to kind of switch sports? So like to go from like Tim Tebow went from like football to baseball.
I mean, I think that Tim Tebow wants to keep playing, and I think he likes the version of himself that is in a sport, and that has this, that has these responsibilities and has this group of people around him. Every time an athlete retires, great ones, people who were really great in college and then don't go into the pros, if you give them a truth serum or put 2 beers in them, what they will always say is they don't miss the cheers, they don't miss the glory. What they miss is the locker room and the guys, and they miss that you and a group of people were engaged in this common struggle against the world. The reason coaches always use the us against the world thing is because it so closely aligns with how it actually feels in the room that it works. Because you do feel like it's this small band of brothers engaged in this important activity together at this time in their lives. And I think people miss that. They miss feeling this connected sense of purpose. Yes.
Mentioned politics,
Yeah.
some of your stuff, and Willie, and sports often gets co-opted by politicians.
Yes.
Whether it's Jesse Owens, whether it's the Trump
Yeah.
NFL stuff. Do you look for that angle when you're looking for
I think sports is a big American story. I think, therefore, it is always political because the reason it's important isn't because we really care about whether the cornerback uses the right technique so they don't false step. Like, I don't think any of us really care about that. We care about this because this has become some sort of morality play, or this has become where these group of people, what Jerry Seinfeld calls sports cheering for laundry, because you don't usually know the players, and so you are investing. The reason people love sports is there's something you bring to the game that invest it with meaning that it doesn't have, and that means that because you make it mean that because it's Ole Miss football. I don't ever go to an Ole Miss football game where I don't think about my father because he loved to go, and this happens over and over. Sports are how we pass down codes about family and about place. And if you're from Pittsburgh, you don't go to a Pittsburgh Steelers game because I really want to see what they do in the Tampa 2. That's not why you're there. And so I think that sports are always cultural, sports are always political, and anybody who tries to strip those things out is sort of proving my point, because they are trying to make this thing into what they need it to be in order for them to still be able to enjoy it and get the required meaning from it. Yes. It being out and my house not getting burned down. No, it's interesting. It was so personal to me, and I loved that story that it was based on so much that I really found that, like, I won't ever do a TV thing now unless I'm the executive producer, because, like, in the end, I won all the fights because I was like, this is my story, and if we got to go 15 rounds about what's going in and going out, we're gonna. But, like, I live here, you know what I mean? Like, you can't just, like, you're wrong about whatever. But it was interesting because there were things that I really had to fight for, and so that was really stressful for me. So, like, the real lesson was don't do something unless you're in charge of it. And it was really, really interesting. The biggest thing I learned from it was that I don't want to be on TV a lot, because the thing aired, 30 for 30s aired on Tuesdays then. This was the first run of them. And it aired on a Tuesday. That Saturday, LSU was playing Alabama at LSU, and they were 1-2, I think. And I had to go down there for work, and I'm not a particularly famous person at all, and so, but that thing aired on a Tuesday, and I was at an airport on Wednesday, and the TSA guy was like, "Oh, hey, 30 for 30." You know what I mean? It was like, wait, what? And I got down to Baton Rouge, and my whole job is to disappear into the woodwork. And just sort of like, I was supposed to be doing a Les Miles story, and I'm there trying to follow Les Miles around, and people are trying to take selfies and stop. And I'm like, I'm working. And I just realized that, like, it was a real gift because I got just a taste of what it's like for people to recognize you. But it wasn't like my actual job, so I was able to consciously give it back. And so, like, I don't think I've done very little television since then. I mean, I sort of do it when I have to do it. But, like, I just realized very quickly, like, the thing that I care about, that I think I'm good at, if I'm well known, I'm going to lose the ability to be the empathetic receiver of information, because now I'm going to be expected to be sort of the animated, cartoonish giver of information. Yes. Yeah. Stumbling around in the dark. I mean, look, I can go way down the rabbit hole in this too and won't, but, like, outlining, I'm a religious outliner. There's a great book called Writing for Story by a guy named John Franklin, and it's just all about structure and conflict and resolution, and, basically the idea that every single story from the Iliad to Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle is essentially the same story arc. It's that, a person encounters an obstacle and is changed by it. And so like there's some just big tentpole ideas about story that once they're hardwired into you, help you do the structure. And so that helps a lot. And again, it's at 10,000 hours. You just do it over and over and over again till you're not so bad at it. Back. That I just moved back here, and I just had loved that. So I was born in 1976, and I had always sort of thought from hearing the stories that like the Archie Manning era were the glory days of Ole Miss football. And I didn't really realize until I started poking around in it that actually they weren't. That was just sort of this sort of unexpected resurgence of something that folks had worried was dying. And so the fervor around it, I feel like had to do with something with that. And so I just wanted to know, I think really great stories are about the beginning of something and the end of something. And I felt like that was both. And I liked that a lot. And so that was really it. It felt like it was almost like a time machine. You had like two civilizations rubbing up against each other. And so I just thought whatever's happening between these things is bound to be interesting. I did it. I talked you out. Oh no, teacher's pet.
So I think it's fascinating that you're not on social media. Do you think it is because you don't need to be? And do you think a young writer, someone just starting out, might need to be in order to be connected in a way that someone who's reached your level doesn't have to?
I'll do those backwards. One, I don't think anyone needs to be. I understand why you would want to be. I understand that it simplifies certain things, and when there are 1,000 people trying to cut through the noise, every instrument you have for cutting through that noise gives you a better chance. So it's a tool, but again, one that you need to be really careful with. And, in the way that like alcoholics like lost the privilege to drink even a little, like I just was not good on it. I was absolutely my worst self. And I just had this moment of clarity. It was Ole Miss had beat Alabama, like the game here, the one they say didn't happen, but I know it happened because it was the greatest day ever. And so I woke up the next day and have people coming in and out of the house, and somebody on social media had started tweeting about I was on TV on game day that day because, game day can't come to Oxford and me not work for it. They'd fire me. And I just wanted to. It was exciting. And so somebody on Twitter said, game day is at Oxford. Great. We get to hear Wright Thompson talk about his dead dad. And I just lost my fucking mind on this guy. And I'm like, I'm going to come to wherever you live and beat you with an axe handle. Like, you think this is funny, but I'm going to get some guys I went to high school with, and we're going to come to your house. And like, I was really angry. And my boss called me. That was a Sunday. My boss called me on Monday and said, "Did you threaten to beat someone up on Twitter?" And I said, "Yes." And he was like, "Why?" And I told him, and he went, "All right, that makes sense, but still, like, you shouldn't do that." And I just was like, I'm going to get fired because I have a temper. And so I just killed all of it because I'm just like, I can't do this. Like, and also, the last thing in that world I want is for more people to be able to get in touch with me. Like, all I want is to be a ghost. So, yeah, no, that's it. Look, I know folks got to go to the next class. We're selling books out there. Buy them.